In the world's most competitive league, the Premier League, there are still 4 weeks left. But there's no doubt anymore about who the champion is. Liverpool secured the title with 4 games to spare, effectively wrapping up the season early. The Reds have gotten us used to their success and the beautiful football they play. And what's more impressive, they've done it by spending far less than their rivals. But how? Through smart planning, a productive academy, and the right managerial choices, they've managed to make moves that generate millions, not just on the pitch, but also in the bank. Is that really possible? If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. If you're a regular, drop a like. Let's get started. Fenway Sports Group, or more commonly known as FSG, purchased the Liverpool club in October 2010. Just like the owners of Arsenal and Manchester United, they are Americans. But unlike the Kroenkes and Glazers, their positive impact on the club was felt much more and in a much shorter time. Big boss John W. Henry is a visionary businessman with experience in sports investments. As a matter of fact, Liverpool is not FSG's only asset. Boston Red Sox, one of the oldest baseball teams in the USA, has been under their management since 2002. In addition to their teams operating in the American Ice Hockey League and NASCAR races, they also own the majority shares of Toulouse, one of the French League One teams. In addition, LeBron James, one of the greatest athletes in the world, is one of the legal partners of Fenway Sports Group, and it is rumored that this partnership will purchase an NBA team in the near future. For Americans, like all sporting events, football is just a weekend pastime. On this side of the globe, football has never been just football. Of course, there are many historical or cultural reasons for this. Europe has been at the center of wars and imperial struggles for centuries. The fate of nations on this continent has been determined on the fronts since the Middle Ages. Football was seen as a modern reflection of these wars. Cities and countries have built identities through their football teams. In England, football was a way for the working class to express themselves during the Industrial Revolution. In Spain, the Franco regime and the Catalan identity continued to conflict around the Barça-Real rivalry, even years after the Civil War ended. Football in the Balkans has turned into a front where ethnic and political tensions are brought to the field. To cut a long story short, we couldn't expect an American to approach this game we call football like Europeans do. They say a person should do what he knows. Of course, this is a prerequisite for being successful in a business, but it is not the only condition. For example, for an American unfamiliar with football to succeed, they must first acknowledge their limitations and delegate responsibilities to experts. This young man, Michael Edwards, was only 32 when he first joined Liverpool. Born in Southampton, England, Michael studied computer science at the University of Sheffield and specialized in data analysis. Edwards, who does not have any football background, started his career in the football world by working as an analyst for clubs such as Portsmouth and Tottenham. Edwards, one of the first people hired by FSG to establish an analytics-focused system after purchasing Liverpool, was his first position at the club as chief analyst. Following his success in the analysis department, he was promoted to technical performance director in 2015. Michael was nicknamed Laptop Guru within the club. The club, which came to a crossroads with Brendan Rodgers, who was the coach at that time due to the unstable results, started to search for a new coach. Ultimately, the name Jürgen Klopp was decided on, and the team that made this decision consisted of only 3 people. The then club CEO Ian Ayre, FSG's head of football operations Mike Gordon, and finally this brilliant analyst Michael Edwards. There is no doubt that this was the right choice, but Jürgen's impact on Liverpool extended far beyond trophies. Don't worry, we'll get to that in a moment. Edwards, who worked in harmony with the German coach during his first year with Klopp, was appointed as sporting director in 2016 and began to manage the club's transfer policies. Edwards, who took responsibility in critical areas such as squad planning by working with the player tracking department, was the person who had the biggest share in managing Liverpool with a Moneyball-like strategy. If you've watched the 2011 movie Moneyball starring Brad Pitt, you know more or less what I'm talking about. FSG never said, "Let's sign the best players money can buy." He did not act with logic. Anyway, John Henry's personal wealth was not at a level that could rival Sheikh Mansour or Todd Bailey. Liverpool had to take a different path to succeed. In other words, they had no money to waste, but they still had to make a lot of moves to compete. Today, it can be said that even a club with almost unlimited financial resources, such as Chelsea or Manchester United, needs at least 4 or 5 transfer windows to create a champion squad when it goes to restructuring. It is inevitable that they will spend nearly €500 million. In fact, these clubs often spend that amount in just one season. In other words, they have a lot of players in their squad that they cannot benefit from for one reason or another, and none of them are cheap players. Let's also remember the team that Liverpool handed over to Jürgen Klopp. Kloppo's first appearance in front of the Anfield stands as Liverpool manager against Rubin Kazan in the UEFA Europa League. When you see Liverpool's starting 11 for that match, I'm sure you'll struggle to remember who some of the players were. So I'm counting them one by one from left to right. Mamadou Sakho. He was a second-rate player, to say the least. Martin Skrtel. He was 31 years old at that time and was sold to Fenerbahce at the end of the season. Simon Mignolet. He was a goalkeeper with potential in his youth, but he could not reach that potential. The fact that he couldn't replace Karius is the clearest proof of this. Divock Origi. Although Klopp described him as a Liverpool legend, in the end, he remained a substitute player. Nathaniel Clyne. He was the right back of the team, and after playing for 2 more seasons, he could not force the starting 11 even in Crystal Palace, where he went due to his chronic injury. Emre. He was probably one of the most useful and important players in the squad, for whom Jürgen was grateful. Philippe Coutinho. Of course, he was the most special and valuable part of the team. Joe Allen. After Liverpool, he was able to play for Stoke City and Swansea. Adam Lallana. He was a talented player, but got injured very often. He's still playing for Southampton, and he's still injured. James Milner. Although his talent was limited, he was a dynamic player and an important character in the dressing room. That's why he stayed in the team for a long time. And finally, Alberto Moreno. He was probably the player that Liverpool fans had the least affection for in the last 10 years. He wasn't bad on offense, but he was a disaster on defense. Michael Edwards' great football mind and squad engineering skills, combined with Jürgen Klopp's tactical genius and player development expertise, would transform such a mediocre squad into a team that played in the Champions League final. It is really difficult to comprehend the success of the Reds by looking at the squad structure of the last few years. The reason why I listed the squad you just saw by name, for those of you who don't know, was to understand more clearly what level Liverpool was a team 10 years ago. In fact, most of the transfers made during the Brendan Rodgers era were players that the coach personally wanted. Let's take 2008, when Manchester City was sold to its new owners Abu Dhabi United Group as a new milestone, and take a look at the Premier League's 7-season standings from that date until 2015, when Edwards and Klopp started working together. As you can see, Liverpool appeared to be a lesser team than Everton, having difficulty even getting a Champions League ticket during this period. I told you they had no money to waste. Indeed, after Edwards took over the transfer operations, they almost never put him on the road. For example, Joel Matip, whom they acquired for free from Schalke in the summer of 2016, served the club for 8 years and was among the defenders who covered the ball the most in the Premier League during his prime period. His former partner Virgil van Dijk praised Matip's ball-carrying skills. "He can move forward with the ball fearlessly," he said. "That's a big thing about him. Sometimes he tells me, 'I wish I could do that,' and I say, 'You already do.'" Gini, who was transferred from Newcastle for €28 million, was a mix of numbers 8 to 10 that fit perfectly into Klopp's system, so to speak. Maybe he wasn't as energetic a player as Milner or Henderson, but he always put Jürgen at ease thanks to his passing quality and scoring potential, especially the legendary 4-0 Barcelona match, and he usually got the reward. Sadio Mane, who came from Southampton for €41 million, was a football player who had proven himself in the Premier League. Don't get me wrong, I'm not claiming that this figure is a small amount of money, but when you consider what United got from the duo Depay and Marshall, whom United transferred in the same summer and spent €94 million in total, fit well into Klopp's gegenpress-oriented game, because he was a tremendous athlete and a great scorer as well. He scored 120 goals in 269 matches for Liverpool and was sent to Bayern Munich in the summer of 2022 for €32 million. As we can see from this example, Liverpool's football mind was active not only when buying but also when selling. Yes, being able to say goodbye to your players at the right time was also an important part of this job. What about paying 42 million euros to bring a player who has been tried and failed in the Premier League back to the league? On the day of the transfer, how many people in the world could have thought that he would become a Premier League legend? It is not known whether Michael Edwards was one of these people, but we know that. The name at the top of Jürgen Klopp's list for that position was not Salah, but Julian Brandt, and Edwards believed that Salah was the right player for this system so much that he practically begged Jürgen to approve this transfer. The German coach trusted the laptop guru. Just like Salah, Andrew Robertson, who completed his 8th year in the team, came from Hull City, which said goodbye to the Premier League in 2017 for only 9 million euros. For example, Benjamin Mendy, who was transferred to Manchester City in the same summer, was also on Liverpool's list and cost City approximately 60 million euros. Although Robertson's potential was not seen as high as Mendy's, he had incredible consistency and, as Klopp has stated many times, was a mental beast. While he turned into one of the best left-backs in the world in Jürgen's hands, his only rival among the defenders with the most assists in the Premier League is his teammate was Alexander-Arnold. Andrew, it was a perfect move in terms of price performance. Let's talk about Virgil van Dijk. His transfer is of course a different story. Southampton was paid 85 million euros for the Dutchman, and this was the highest price paid for a defender at that time. Unfortunately, this transfer record soon became history with Manchester United's move for Harry Maguire. However, it should not be forgotten that, in the same period, Liverpool sold its biggest star, Coutinho, to Barcelona and put 135 million euros in its safe. As of the winter when the transfer took place, it was a matter of curiosity whether Virgil was really good enough to deserve this price. In fact, Liverpool tried to convince Southampton throughout the summer but was unsuccessful. In fact, they were so insistent on this issue that they had to apologise to the Southampton club with an official declaration in response to the claim that they had distracted the player. In the apology text, "We have terminated all interest in the actor," they said. However, Jürgen and Edwards were determined to be obsessed with Van Dijk. No other player was transferred to the centre-back position, and as December ended, there was a knock on Southampton's door again. Even though they had to pay a record price in return, they finally managed to add that unique piece to the squad that they persistently wanted and thought would bring a level to the team. When Jürgen and Edwards looked at each other at Virgil's signing ceremony, the same thing was going through their minds. We got the best defender in the world. This idea, which was only in their minds that day, would become the common opinion of the whole world in a very short time. Despite suffering a serious injury in 2020, the Dutch big man is still one of the best in the world and is now the team captain. With the addition of these 6 players, whom they acquired in 3 transfer windows and invested a total of 205 million euros, Liverpool became a Champions League finalist in May 2018. The Champions League is a whole different level, and at such levels, you are always as strong as your weakest link. Who knows? If they had signed Alisson Becker 6 months earlier, the trophy might have gone to Liverpool instead. As a matter of fact, Liverpool learned painfully that they needed a first-class goalkeeper after this final, and signed Alisson for 62 million euros the following summer. In a sense, Edwards transformed Coutinho into Van Dijk plus Alisson, placing one of the best goalkeepers in the world behind the best defender. Fabinho from Monaco was brought in front of him at 45. The Brazilian was one of the rising stars in his position, and it was widely rumoured that Edwards had plucked Fabinho from City and United. Following these additions, the Reds were once again in the Champions League final the following May. Moreover, this time they did not return empty-handed. While Liverpool won Europe's biggest cup for the 6th time, they also had a breathtaking championship race with Man City in the Premier League. Jürgen's team, which was behind its opponent by only 1 point, lost the championship by just that little difference. The German coach, who was criticised for losing the finals and not winning the cup until that season, ended Liverpool's 30-year championship longing the following year and left everyone without an argument. Moreover, no major additions were made to the squad that season. Jürgen on the field, Michael in the kitchen, together they had officially signed a revolution. In fact, if a club, that is a club of Liverpool's size, closes a summer transfer window without making a move, this is the biggest indicator of what kind of football mind that club has. It shows how much they trust in the squad engineering they do, and how solidly based the team they have established is. While their rivals couldn't get enough of spending, this duo, as a result of their excellent planning, chose to sit back and relax that summer. It is one of the basic rules of economics. You cannot survive by consuming alone. For a sustainable financial structure, you also need to produce. Liverpool had to forge their own path against rivals who had turned this into a sort of unlimited spending race. However, they achieved this not only by smart transfer moves, but also by producing their own players. A good academy means not only developing players, but also preserving the identity of the club. Liverpool was not a club that made huge investments in the academy. However, they made a difference by focusing on training players of a certain profile by using their budgets efficiently. Conclusion: names such as Trent Alexander-Arnold, Curtis Jones, Harvey Elliott, Kawim Kelleher, Jarell Quansah, and Connor Bradley left the club's academy and were appointed to the first team. Alexander-Arnold transformed into a modern playmaking fullback, while Curtis Jones took on a key role in midfield. Although Harvey Elliott was transferred from Fulham at a very young age, he was developed in the Liverpool academy and became a very valuable part of the rotation. The best backup goalkeeper in the world, Kelleher created a reliable alternative for Alisson, who had injury problems from time to time. Young players like Quansah or Connor Bradley have proven that they can play in this structure without any hesitation whenever they take part. Imagine how much it would cost if they tried to buy all these players I mentioned from outside. However, instead of spending big money, Liverpool made these players a part of the team. For example, this is something Chelsea can't do. Imagine Elliott or Jones growing up at Chelsea. Do you think their fate would have been different than Declan Rice? Liverpool, on the other hand, never hesitates to give academy graduates a chance to play. There are also academy products such as Nico Williams, Ryan Brewster or Harry Wilson that are sold at good prices and converted into cash. Liverpool's plans were built on a predetermined system. This did not mean blindly spending big money on players who played well for 1 year, but choosing the most suitable name according to certain roles and needs. After winning the title in 2020, a few moves by Michael Edwards partially transformed the team, and Liverpool saw their third Champions League final of the Jürgen Klopp era in 2 years. For example, Ibrahima Konate, who was transferred from Leipzig for €40 million in 2021 to strengthen the defensive line. Due to Matip's injury problems and Joe Gomez's up-and-down performance, a defensive reinforcement was needed. Liverpool chose Konate, who is 22 years old and mature at the Bundesliga level. He made a great contribution to the team in both the short and long term as a very fast, strong and dominant defender in the air for his physique. I would also like to remind you that Manchester United bought Raphael Varane, who was at the end of his career, for the same price, and today these two have become one of the best defensive tandems in the world. Similarly, the Jota transfer is another indication of how rational Liverpool's planning is. Looking for an alternative scorer to Sadio Mane and Salah, Liverpool chose Jota, a hard-working and goal-oriented player who has proven himself in the Premier League, instead of buying an expensive superstar. There are rumours that Klopp was not very keen on the Portuguese player at first, but once again, he trusted laptop guru, and Michael did not mislead him again. Jota provided depth to Liverpool's offensive line by scoring 21 goals in all competitions in his first season. The Luis Diaz transfer was an example of how much planning is done in advance. Mane's departure was imminent, and Liverpool realised this in advance, making the move for Luis Diaz, while the Colombian was going through the adaptation process, and Diaz was gradually integrated into the lineup. The transfer of Thiago Alcantara added a new dimension to the team's game plan. Klopp's midfield relied on dynamism and intense pressure. However, sometimes a more controlled player who could make plays was needed. Thiago had the elite playmaker profile that Liverpool had been missing for years. Even though his continuity was low due to injury problems, he added quality every time he was on the field. The new team that emerged with these 4 additions may not have been the most successful team of Jürgen's era, but it was his masterwork in terms of the football played. While they left their opponents breathless with their tempo, they also managed to dominate the ball when they wanted. Liverpool reached the finals in all 4 competitions in the 2021-22 season, winning the FA Cup and League Cup, but bowed out to a unique Thibaut Courtois performance in the Champions League final. In the Premier League, they once again missed the championship by a single point. Well, Hasn't this great football mind made any mistakes? Of course it happened. It happens anyway. People make mistakes, and Edwards did too. For example, Naby Keita cost Liverpool £52 million, but he could never reach the expected level due to struggling with injuries. Oxlade-Chamberlain, who was transferred for £35 million, had a few bright seasons, but injuries set him back a long way. Darwin Núñez? Yes, we can say that the Uruguayan did not deliver what was expected compared to the transfer fee, but Núñez was not Edwards' transfer anyway. Michael left his position at the club at the beginning of the summer of 2022, stating that he wanted to take a break for a while and renew himself. However, if we put aside the Núñez transfer after Edwards, who worked as a methodology manager at the club for a while, it is possible to say that the club continues to make rational moves thanks to the methods he taught. The best way to achieve this is the change in the midfield. Liverpool revamped their aging and underperforming midfield of Fabinho, Henderson and Thiago by bringing in Gravenberch, McAllister and Szoboszlai in just one transfer window. 3 players sold for a total of €150 million. That's almost as much as Chelsea paid just for Enzo Fernandez. During this 10-year period, Liverpool made many important sales, just like its purchases, that do not attract much attention when you look at them individually. But when you add them up, they add up to a serious sum. They earned €26 million from Brewster, €25 million from Danny Ings, €23 million each from Vandenberg and Carvalho, €21 million from Solanke, €20 million from Neco Williams, and even €12 million from Dejan Lovren, not to mention Fabinho and Henderson, whom they sent to Saudi Arabia for a total of €60 million. When all these come together, Liverpool has become the team that spent the least money on transfers among the big 6 teams in the last 10 years. Amazing job. They spent even less than Tottenham. Moreover, they are not even among the top 7 teams, with the highest losses in the Premier League in terms of income and expenses. West Ham and Newcastle's net loss is greater than Liverpool. On the other hand, when we look at the standings of the last 10 years, Liverpool takes second place behind Manchester City. There is no need for forced praise. These tables already reveal the success of their work. Finally, let's talk about the choice of coach, which is one of the most important issues on the road to success. Jürgen Klopp went down in history as a Liverpool legend with what he did here, but we cannot explain what he achieved only with trophies or average points. Jürgen was not only a good tactician, but also a character who had good chemistry with the Anfield fans. He taught this team to play with their emotions, not despite them. In this way, Liverpool turned Anfield into a castle and made epic comebacks in many matches where they were defeated. They lost only 12 times in the 167 home matches they played in the league during the Klopp era, and 5 of these losses coincided with the pandemic period when the matches were played without spectators. Besides all this, Jürgen established a system that glorifies the players, not a system that depends on the players. This is exactly why Arne Slot, who took over from him, can continue its tradition of success by building on the same foundations. Let's make a point here. Michael Edwards returned to the club in 2024. This is actually a move we see frequently among senior executives in the modern business world. In order to make you feel how valuable you are to the company, sometimes you need to take a short break so that you can better understand how much space your existence covers when you are not around. And when this is understood, you come back with a much bigger promotion and a much bigger paycheck than your previous title. In the summer of 2024, Michael Edwards was back inside to design the Post-Klopp era, this time as a CEO. Little touches were added to the job descriptions at all levels. From scouting to the analysis team, new faces were added to the staff. And it came down to making that big decision. And this decision was an interesting one, as we have often seen from Michael before. Any other manager could easily have gone to a high-profile coach with a similar CV. However, when Arne Margin Slot signed for Liverpool, he was someone football fans who were not very interested in the game had never heard of before. But this choice was not even questioned at Anfield. If your team's football mind made a choice that changed the history of the club, like Jürgen Klopp in the previous test, you wouldn't question it anyway. This club, whose history we took a look at in the last 10 years, is a marvel of planning. Despite the change of coach, the fact that they closed the last 2 transfer periods without making any major moves is the biggest indicator of this. And Liverpool have officially claimed their 20th Premier League title.
Jürgen Klopp! Ja,